With their city under siege, a desperate Roman garrison sends its best men into a hidden tunnel, with the task of killing the enemy on the other side. The fate of everyone in the city would hang on their success. But as the Romans advance, they encounter an enemy that no amount of training could have helped them overcome: toxic gas. Within minutes, they collapse one by one, coughing and gasping for air. Little did they know that this tunnel would become their grave for thousands of years. I am pleased to say this video is part of a collaboration with Told in Stone. While this video focuses on the dramatic siege, his video explores the fascinating history and discoveries at Dura Europos, which greatly transformed our understanding of the Roman world. I would also like to personally thank Garrett for helping us gain some awareness in this tough time after losing our main channel, which says a lot about his character and passion for the history community. Click the link in the description to support and watch his video about the other side of this story. The Romano-Sassanid Wars were among the longest and fiercest conflicts of late antiquity, a centuries-long rivalry between two superpowers fighting for control of the Middle East. Some of its defining moments are very well known, like Julian's disastrous campaign, the Siege of Amida, the Battle of Dara, and the sweeping Sassanid conquests of the early 7th century. Yet beneath these towering events lie episodes long overlooked, hidden until rediscovered in the 20th century. One of these was the Sassanid siege of Dura Europos in 256 AD, a dramatic encounter and the first recorded instance of chemical warfare in history. The city quickly became a key link in the Euphrates frontier, serving as the seat of the Dux Ripae, the officer responsible for this sector of the border since the early 3rd century. From Dura, Rome could not only defend the river frontier but also launch campaigns across it, and the city itself possessed formidable defenses, both natural and man-made. The Euphrates River made any direct assault from the east impossible, while the north and south were guarded by deep wadis and steep cliffs, making the terrain unsuitable for siege operations. The city itself was enclosed by a strong Hellenistic wall, reinforced with towers mounted with artillery. The western side was the most likely target for attackers, since it was the only vulnerable approach, and was therefore heavily fortified. Though the Sassanids occasionally captured it, Emperor Valerian reclaimed Dura in 254. Its proud garrison was the 20th Palmyrene cohort, a mixed infantry and cavalry unit nearly 1,000 strong, which was often reinforced by detachments from the 4th Scythica and 16th Flavia Firma legions. Altogether, historians estimate that 2,000 to 4,000 men defended the city at all times, which reflected its high status. Their primary duty was to man and patrol outposts stretching dozens of miles along the river frontier. After recapturing the city, the Roman garrison knew that a future Sassanid attack was only a matter of time. Apart from possessing vast resources and manpower, the Sassanids were also highly skilled in the art of siege warfare. They were known to build siege engines with remarkable speed, undermine towers and walls with great precision, and even redirect entire rivers to sweep away enemy fortifications. The Roman garrison knew they would soon be in a fight for their lives. They immediately set about strengthening the city's defenses. Earthworks were to be built along the inner and outer faces of the wall to counter battering rams and mining operations. All inner buildings along the wall were demolished, leaving only the closest walls as containment barriers for the soil, though even they proved too weak and were later filled on both sides. This would create a makeshift ramp, which would also allow Roman reserves to quickly support threatened sectors on the walls. Lastly, this massive project was strengthened by a mud brick glacis on the outer face of the walls. All the Roman garrison could do now is keep an eye on the horizon and wait. In the summer of 256 AD, a large Sassanid army, likely led by Shapur I himself, finally arrived. Unfortunately, the lack of any written sources make it impossible to establish a clear chronology of the siege operations. But thanks to 20th century excavations, we can now at least reconstruct the Sassanid approach and the main events that followed. After a series of preliminary skirmishes, the outnumbered Roman garrison withdrew into the city to prepare for the siege. Evidence of damage and scattered arrows along the entire length of the western wall shows that the Sassanids tried to stretch the defenders thin, attacking repeatedly along its entire length, and especially at the Palmyra gate. To suppress the volume of defensive fire, they deployed their own artillery and engaged in duels with the Romans, a fact still visible in wall damage. But it's clear that the heaviest Sassanid effort was focused on the southwestern sector. Across from it lies the key to one of the most remarkable discoveries at Dura Europos. Archaeologists identified a small, strange hill which seemed oddly out of place with its surroundings. Its unusual shape soon revealed its true nature. It was a pile of excess soil from a mining operation aimed at the foundations of Tower 19 and the adjoining wall. At first, this growing pile of soil must have been barely noticeable from the battlements. But as the digging progressed, its growth, together with the sounds and vibrations of tunneling, soon betrayed its presence. The Romans quickly started working on a countermine, racing to intercept it before the Sassanids reached the wall. To locate the direction of enemy diggers, they likely pressed their ears to stone walls, or watched for ripples in bowls of water placed on the ground. In time, the Romans succeeded in intercepting the Sassanid tunnel. A storming party of some of the garrison's best men was hastily assembled and sent in to clear the passage, while a human chain followed closely behind them, holding buckets of sand to put out fires and seal the tunnel. What followed inside that narrow passage would become one of the most gruesome discoveries in archaeology. Unbeknownst to the garrison, the Sassanids had anticipated the countermine and prepared a deadly trap. They lit a brazier and filled it with sulfur crystals and naphtha, a flammable liquid hydrocarbon, which produced fumes of sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide. Taking advantage of the favorable wind condition and the elevated Roman tunnel acting as a natural chimney, they funneled the fumes straight into the attackers. As the Romans broke through and advanced, the fumes burned their eyes, noses, and lungs with an acid-like irritation, while the carbon monoxide prevented their blood cells from carrying enough oxygen. Within minutes, 19 men died, choking and coughing in agony. Panic quickly spread as the survivors fled the mine. When the smoke finally cleared, the Sassanids pressed forward into the countermine, until one of them was suddenly impaled by a powerful bolt. It was fired from a Roman scorpion, which was cleverly placed at the entrance of the narrow 1.7-meter tunnel. The Sassanids were forced to hastily erect a barricade from the bodies of the fallen Romans and halt their advance. With no way forward, the Sassanids collapsed the countermine and pressed on with their own mining. But their efforts ended in frustration. The Roman earthworks kept Tower 19 and the adjacent wall from falling, causing them instead to sink about 1 and 2.5 meters, making them only unstable as artillery platforms. The Romans had failed to seize the mine, but their defensive preparations saved the garrison. Today, the ruins of Tower 19 mark the site of the first recorded chemical attack in history, where archaeologists uncovered the remains of 19 cramped Romans and a lone Sassanid in the tunnel. But the assault on Tower 19 was not the only mining effort. Determined to take the city by storm, the Sassanids began building a massive assault ramp to deploy siege towers between Towers 14 and 15. At the same time, they started digging 2 parallel mines on either side of the ramp, each wide enough for a small assault party. The plan was simple. Once the siege towers reached the wall, troops would burst out from the tunnels and cut down the Roman garrison from the rear. And the excess soil from these tunnels would go towards building the ramp, and thus be unnoticed by the Romans. As the Sassanids were building the ramp, flanking fire from Tower 14 proved to be a big nuisance, as it managed to kill many of their men and greatly slow their progress. So much so that it forced them to start working on a new mine to take it out. Having learned their lesson from the last mine, this time they worked undetected and undermined all of its foundations, not just part of them. But when the mine was set ablaze, the results were no better than before. The tower only sank a few meters, leaving it unfit for artillery but still standing, a marginal victory at best. Now freed from Tower 14's artillery fire, the Sassanids pressed on with their ramp, only to find that the Romans had raised the mud wall in front of it, nullifying their advantage. To make matters worse, this was only part of what the Romans had in store. All this time, they had been secretly digging countermines towards the Sassanids, and out of nowhere, Roman storming parties burst out of them, overrunning the miners and sealing off their tunnels. Now in control of the Sassanid mines, the Romans, in a brilliant reversal, turned them against the enemy and undermined their assault ramp, which soon collapsed and was rendered useless. In doing so, the Romans masterfully neutralized the Sassanids' two-pronged attack and preserved the city. The siege of Dura Europos would last for several more months of brutal fighting, but in the end, the Romans' tactical successes in defending the city would not prevent a strategic defeat. Cut off from any outside help, and with supplies dwindling, the garrison had no choice but to surrender. The surviving soldiers and civilian population were deported to Persia, and the city, sacked and emptied, was never repopulated by its conquerors. Only a century later, Ammianus Marcellinus would describe Dura Europos as follows: when Julian had there, in accordance with his piety, made offerings to the deified emperor, and was on his way to Dura, a deserted town, he saw a troop of soldiers in the distance and halted. The fall of Dura Europos is often overshadowed by the tragedies that befell Roman Syria in the mid-3rd century. Just 4 years after this incident, an even greater disaster struck at the Battle of Edessa, where Emperor Valerian was defeated and captured, spending the rest of his life in Sassanid captivity. Yet today, the miraculously preserved remains of Dura Europos not only stand as a haunting testament to the city's dramatic final stand, but also represent much of our knowledge of the Roman world. And as a result of this, we owe it a lot of respect and care. Make sure to check out Told in Stone's video about the amazing finds at Dura Europos, including the one and only Legionary shield that was found there. A special thanks from me goes to our Patreon supporters who continue to support us despite losing our main channel. I will be re-uploading all our previous 55 videos for them as a reward, and because re-uploads don't really seem to perform well on YouTube, and I don't really want to spoil this channel's potential with them. But please consider joining them to help us keep making new videos for your enjoyment. I hope to see you all in the next one.